Okay. Um, so now we're recording. Great. So we're talking about arrays at a low level for everything with a computer, whether it's how data is stored on some physical device, whether it's how the CPU processes data, whether it's a GPU, a graphical processing unit, like on a graphics card, the way that that processes data. Everything at the lowest level are ones and zeros, or ons and offs, high voltage, low voltage, um, magnetic polarity north, magnetic polarity south. Some, like there's, depending on the physical device that you're dealing with, how you represent the ones and zeros can be different. This isn't a hardware class. We're not going to be talking about it. Again, just know that it's there. And let's see. So we were also talking about these jargon. A bit, a byte, and then as we go up, kilobytes, megabytes, gigabytes, terabytes, petabytes, exabytes, zettabytes. It's just jargon for for a word that you can use to talk about how many bits, how many ones and zeros you're dealing with. So it's like learning, millimeter, centimeter, decimeter, meter, decameter, kilometer, right? All of these are just different scales of some type of distance. Here, this is about the amount of storage, the amount of information that's being taken up. So a bit is one bit of information. It's either a 0 or a 1. And when you have many, many, many bits together, that can represent more information, and things like movie files have more information in them than things like text files, because it'll have sound, it'll have pixel colors, red, green, blue, one pixel for however high quality the video is. If it's a 4K video, you're going to have 4,000 pixels or 3,900 pixels across, and I don't know, 1440 pixels down. Who cares? In any case, like a higher quality video will have more pixels. It'll be a bigger file because it requires more information. Okay, so this is where we left off the last class and where I'd like to pick up today. So my goal here is for the idea of files. Again, both on the software side and the hardware side, because when you're talking about the size of a file, that's something you can see on your computer. Browse through your computer, right-click on files, look at the properties, and see how big the file is. How big it is the operating system telling you how much space it's physically taking up on some device. Okay, so I think this is a good place to start. What are software programs, or what are certain types of files that through software you have these types of files? And then for these files, how much space do they take up? And to have kind of just a feeling for it. If a file is a terabyte, is that a lot? Is it a little? Is it in between? Does it depend? This is the type of thing that I want you to have somewhat of a feel for. Okay, I think this is an important piece of your background knowledge. All right. So before I start, I'm going to be picking out random students, asking about basically what files can you think of and how big are they. Before I do that, I've been talking now for almost 20 minutes, and I like to have more feedback. I don't like to just bloviate for 20 minutes and have students sit there and listen to me. So before I go on and start picking out on you guys, from what I've said so far, are there any questions about anything? I'll wait like 10 seconds for you guys. You can type or you can unmute yourself. Either one's okay.
Are we gonna have to know like a certain amount of these types of bytes? Like, are we gonna have to know up to exabytes since you have that underlined, or
No.
do we use jargon? You're saying?
Yeah, good question. I would, honestly, I'll cut it off here at terabyte. You should know a terabyte. Petabyte, exabyte, zettabyte, that's extra. A terabyte you should know because if you buy a hard drive, like if you're walking around Walmart, Sam's, Costco, whatever, and they're selling hard drives like on the shelves, they're going to be in terabytes, like for sure. So at least know that much. Like if you're walking through a store and you're looking at hard drives or data storage devices, have a concept for how much that is. Petabyte, exabyte, zettabyte, that is not anything at the consumer level. That is definitely at the corporate level. For petabytes, if you're planning on getting kind of serious with databases, yeah, be comfortable with petabytes as well. You work for Google, you work for Amazon, you work for Microsoft, you work for Facebook, guaranteed they're in the petabyte territory. Or you work for the government, same thing. There's like we're there already in the petabyte territory. So for this class, going past a terabyte doesn't really matter. But for real life, like if you're in an interview and somebody throws out the word petabyte, yeah, know that it's 1,000 terabytes. That's fine. Exabyte, zettabyte, these are just because. I mean, like that's what comes next. But nothing that I imagine that anybody would be dealing with in the real world anytime soon. Unless you're like really working on the forefront of stuff. So for this class, definitely a byte, kilobyte, megabyte, gigabyte, definitely no. Terabyte is also pretty standard. A terabyte won't be the size of a single file, but it will be the size of a hard drive. So if you have a terabyte drive, you can store 1,000 files that are a gigabyte big, like that. So, yeah, good question. Let me put this here. Just for fun. I'll say this. Petabyte, maybe no for interviews. That's if you're having an interview where you're dealing with databases in some respect. Being able to know that is going to avoid you a little bit of embarrassment in an interview. But for the purposes of this class solely, terabyte and smaller is fine. Okay, any other questions? I'll give 5 seconds. Okay, then let me pick on just random people. How about Cole Asroff? Cole, you have a mic?
Hey, yeah.
Hey. Yeah, there might be a little bit of feedback there. Okay, do any of these words, are you familiar with them? A kilobyte, megabyte, gigabyte? Like, have you seen it before? Is there a file that you've seen that is in one of these sizes?
Yeah, they sound similar.
Okay, like which one? Like what's a file that you can think of? A file type that's
Um,
in that range.
I would say for like PlayStation,
Oh,
um,
okay.
probably terabyte, right?
Does a so the hard drive inside of the PlayStation.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Um, so let's do this. Okay, so good. Size of PlayStation hard drive. By the way, HDD is just hard drive. Okay, it's just shorthand for it. Okay, good. So that's the amount of storage space available on something like a PlayStation. Probably an Xbox is in the same range. Um, okay, very good. Okay. Oh, very good. Artem, do you have a mic? You just typed something.
Yeah, Professor, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, like the hottest game right now is Call of Duty Warzone,
Mm-hmm.
and that game is actually like over 100 gigabytes, which is ridiculous. It's like the biggest game I've ever seen in terms of memory wise.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Good. Very good. Yeah. So games. That's another thing. Games, especially modern day games, take up a lot of space. Or at least by today's terms, they seem like a lot of space. I mean, I remember in high school, playing, Doom, Half-Life, uh, I don't know, Quake, Quake 2, Quake 3, these types of games, and they would take up like under a gigabyte, maybe like the size of a CD or something. But today, yeah, 100 gigabytes is standard-ish for kind of modern day games. So now there's already we have two separate things. One is the size of a game, which is more of the software end of it, because it's a game that you can play. Where the terabyte example that we have right now is just talking about the storage space available on a PlayStation. So if Call of Duty is around 100 gigabytes, then that would mean on your PlayStation, you might be able to install around 10 games before you run out of space. Unless it's a 2 terabyte, 3 terabyte, whatever. If it's a 1 terabyte thing, and games, the bigger ones, take up 100 gigabytes, then your PlayStation can hold how many games? Maybe 10. Not all games are that big and stuff, but this is what I mean about kind of translating between how much storage space is available and how much uh, software files actually occupy on them. So how many files can you store? This is a really good thing, yeah. Games are very big. 4K video is big. Virtual reality games are big. 360-degree video is big. All of these are in kind of the gigabyte territory. So you don't necessarily need to know what the exact number is, but go by like a factor of 10. Or go by, well, you would measure this in some number of gigabytes. Or, like games, we don't measure them in megabytes unless they're old. Um, Modern day games are measured in gigabytes. Modern day hard drives are measured in terabytes. And that's why I'm focusing on this now. So that way, when you hear each of these terms, you have some kind of concept in your head of what types of files are in this category. Or if I'm thinking about this category, what types of files are at play. Okay. Yeah, games. Yeah, that's it. Honestly, no, yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, I've been playing what is it? Star Wars Battlefront 2, which is fantastic. 80 gigabytes. Came out in 2017. Um, yeah, so games are bigger now. Oh, Flight Simulator. Actually, that one, I think it takes up 300 gigabytes. I haven't downloaded it, but I've heard about it. Microsoft Flight Simulator. A lot of stuff happening there. Anyway, yeah, right? Yeah, yeah. It just came out 2 or 3 weeks ago. It kind of made a splash because it has like the entire real world. It has so it's made by Microsoft. Microsoft has Bing Maps, like Google Maps, and it has an actual map of the entire world. It's like Google Earth, except the Microsoft equivalent. The entire planet. And the actual flight patterns of planes really going on in the real world and real world weather conditions. So, like, there's a hurricane, I think, that's going to be hitting Louisiana sometime here in the next couple of days. I was just reading about it this morning. You played Microsoft Flight Simulator, the hurricane's there. Like, yeah, crazy stuff. And it also takes up, just a massive amount of memory or a massive amount of storage space, and you need a nice computer to play it and stuff. Anyway, yeah, video games are a very good example because they are really, they're a single kind of thing that are about among the biggest examples that you could think of as far as storage requirements. So that's really good. Very good. I mean, it renders as it goes. I think that, the 300 gigabytes has to be something. But yeah, certainly I think like the weather patterns and stuff like that, it might be loading it bits at a time. Like if you're flying over the Gulf Coast, why would you need to render the model or, the weather patterns in China or India? Like if you actually wanted to fly there in the game, well, you'll render them when you're close. These are optimization things, whatever. Okay. How about Joshua? Joshua Shupak? Shupak?
Yeah, hello.
Yeah, hey. So I'm just going to kind of go down the list here. So we have something in a gigabyte territory. Can you think of anything in like the megabyte, gigabyte territory? If it's in the gigabyte, something other than a game. Or anything in the megabyte territory that you can think of.
MP3 files are usually pretty small.
Perfect, yeah. MP3 files are definitely in the megabyte territory. MP3s, I'll add FLAC, WAV, whatever, sound files. Yeah. Okay. Can you think of anything else in the gigabyte territory besides games, just out of curiosity?
I mean, an MP4 file, like if you did the same thing, like the music video is probably in gigabytes.
Yeah, movies. Yeah, movies, video. Perfect. Yeah. So movies and video. I'm sorry, I just turned off my screen. I'll get it back. I need a pin. Good. All right. So here, movies, videos. I'll say 1 to 5 gigabytes. So for me, 1 gigabyte is about the size of a movie. So if you, if you're watching a movie, it's within this range. A higher quality movie is going to be more in like the 5 gigabyte territory. That's going to be your 4K movies, your Blu-ray DVDs. It's going to be in like the 5 to 10 range. But that tends to be rare unless it's a very high quality movie. Like I said, 4K, Blu-ray, that kind of stuff. But other videos, most of your MP4s, AVIs, MKV, these different movie file types are going to be more around in the 1, maybe 2 gigabyte range. A TV show, if it's high quality, is 1 gigabyte for a high quality TV show that's 20 or 30 minutes. For a normal TV show, 300 megabytes, 250 megabytes, something like that. So, okay. Good. How about kilobytes? Is there anybody, otherwise I'll pick out on random people, but is there anybody you can think of some type of file that you would generally measure in kilobytes, but it's not megabytes, it's just kilobytes?
Word
Like
files.
pictures.
Good. Yep. PDF, doc, Word doc. Yeah. Excellent. PDF, Word doc. Yeah, small PDFs. PDFs, they can get into the megabyte territory, but it's not that big. 20 megabytes, 30 megabytes. You download like a book in PDF. In fact, maybe this book. Maybe you have it as a PDF. Look at how big it is. This one is probably in the megabyte territory. 20 megabytes, maybe 15 megabytes, whatever it is. But that's also a lot of text, right? If it's like a paper that you're writing for class and it's 10 pages, 20 pages, 30, 50 pages, yeah, with no pictures, it's probably kilobytes. Yeah, very good. Okay, so I'm not going to go that much deeper than this. The point of this is, again, to have some type of concept in your head, some type of gut level feeling for when you hear the word megabyte, gigabyte, terabyte, that you have something to connect it to, that you can kind of understand, and you can, you know, if there's a drive that's 10 terabytes, is that a lot of space? Is it little space? Maybe it depends. If you're holding text files, it's a ton of space. If you're holding, you know, if you're like a really big gamer and you're doing VR and you're downloading movies and stuff like this, maybe like a 10 terabyte drive is reasonable. It's not crazy, but it'll last you for maybe a couple of years, this kind of thing. Okay, for class, we've now, I think, covered enough ground, thinking about text documents, sound, video, games, scientific data and stuff, like at the Large Hadron Collider, if you're familiar with it. This really big particle accelerator in Europe. I mean, that generates where you take particles, like protons, and you spin them around at like 99.9999% the speed of the light one way, and then you have another one going around the other way, and then you have like a head-on collision between them, and other particles are created, and things like this. For a single collision, there's so much stuff that happens. I mean, that's another gigabyte kind of level of information that you save all of it. Okay, whatever. Hopefully this is enough to give you either a feeling already, or at least give you a path to start having a feeling for these kinds of things. One really easy thing to do is to just look around your own computer, or look on your phone. Look at what are the biggest files on your phone or on your computer, and what kinds of files are they, and how big is your computer? If you're using a computer, if you're using a laptop, how big is your hard drive? How much memory, how much RAM do you have in your own computer? And do you have lots of space left over? Are you having to delete things to make room for more? Having some type of concept for these things is, I believe, an important part of the background of thinking about databases, which is thinking about large amounts of data, and that it's not just a foreign language that you have no connection with. So search around your computer, search around your phone, whatever. JPEG pictures. That's another great one. That's in the megabyte. Yeah, pictures. PNG, JPEG. Yeah, pictures are in the megabyte territory. Yeah. Those are very good. Excellent. Okay, so I think that's about all that I want to say for the, this is a little bit more towards the software side. Now, how to say, yeah, let me give you a little bit of an introduction to the hardware side. Okay, we will touch a little bit more on this probably next week, especially with hard drives. But for now, I don't know what your background is with storage. So I have some things to show you. All right, so let me do this. I'm gonna kind of angle this camera down, hopefully where you can see my desk, and fine. All right. So there's a couple ways. Let's see if I can get this. Sorry, that's not very good. I wish I could angle this even better. Let me try something. All right. So as you can see, things are going great. Yeah, let me, sorry, my desk thing just fell off here. Hopefully I can get a better angle. If I do, let's see. Let's try this, maybe. Will that work? Pardon me, I didn't prepare that much before this lecture. I do have some cool things to show you, I think. But let's try that. Maybe I can get a good angle here. Maybe not. Okay, try lowering that. Okay, hopefully that's good. All right, I'm trying to see. Where? Here. Okay. Or maybe I'll just, you know what? I'll just hold them up. So here, you have a, this is a sort of standard hard drive. Okay, this is mechanical. So if you were to open this up, you can sort of see the size of it. On the back, you'll see some connectors. That there's something for power. There's something for data, and even just on the outside, you can kind of see this like raised area here. Same thing in the back. You can see this little thing here. That's actually a motor. So this is a moving part. It's a motor that spins. And inside of this, I'll show a video of this later, not today's class, but later, where somebody actually opens up one of these hard drives, and you can see on the inside. Basically, what's inside of this are a series of discs that are about that big, very, very shiny, and there's a number of these discs. And then with each of these discs, there's like a head that is over it, kind of like a record player. You know how you have a record, and then the needle of the record player can kind of go different positions to touch either more inside of the disc to read, you know, the inside music songs or otherwise on the outside of the disc, depending on where the head is. Very much like a record player is the inside of this type of hard drive. So this is a mechanical hard drive. That means it has moving parts. And you'll see this particular hard drive is 8 terabytes. Okay, so like I said, when you're consumer grade kind of hard drives are in the terabyte territory. There, I think you can get single hard drives that are up to like 500 terabytes or something, but I think that's rare. In most cases, you would have maybe like an 8 or a 10 terabyte drive, and let's say a 10 terabyte drive, and you might have 5 of them. Well, now you have 50 terabytes. That's how you would get to 50 terabytes, is you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drives. And in big data centers and stuff, there will be machines that are basically just a ton of hard drives put together. In fact, later in this course, this is the type of computer from, for example, Microsoft Azure that you'll be having an account on. Not one that's very powerful with a CPU, not a powerful GPU or anything like that, but it'll have a lot of storage. So a lot of these types of hard drives, and they'll probably be these kinds. So this is your sort of standard hard drive that you would find in a PC. The next type of hard drive I want to show is this, and this is really just the casing. The hard drive is actually inside of this. Here's for comparison. So this type of hard drive. I think it's called a 3.5 inch, and this is, I don't know, 4.5 inch maybe. This type of hard drive, again, this is just the casing for it. So there's like a little USB plug there for it, so you can plug it into your computer. This is the type of hard drive in your laptop that you might have. If you have a spinning disk hard drive in your laptop, it's going to be this size because that's too big for a laptop. For a PC, for a server, this type of hard drive is cheaper and it can hold more space, but you can't fit that in a laptop. So you have these types of drives. And also these types of drives are easy to carry around and throw in your backpack or whatever. This is about 1 terabyte. In fact, I think it is 1 terabyte. Yeah, 1 terabyte. I don't know if you can see it there or not. 1 terabyte. So here's 1 terabyte, there's 8 terabytes. To find a drive of this size that's 8 terabytes, I'm sure it exists. It would be more expensive than the bigger drive. Okay? Now, the thing about both of these is that they're mechanical. Again, there's a motor inside of here, and there's disks. And the motor spins up, and it makes the disks spin like a record player, and then there's a head that goes over and reads the information. For each of these, there's also very, very strong magnets inside of them. So this isn't a physics course. This isn't, that deep of a computer architecture course, but just for fun. These storage devices work with magnetism. So this is using, positive, or rather, north and south poles. So there's very strong magnets in these that change the polarity. So here, if it's north, we'll call that 1. If it's south, we'll call that 0. That's how these drives work. Okay. If you have a drive that breaks on you, open it up, take a look, take out the magnets. They're super strong. You can use them for like fridge magnets and stuff. All right, so this is one class of storage. Okay, this is the cheapest and the highest density. So these types of drives will be able to hold the most information as possible. But because there's moving parts, things can break. Maybe if you've had a computer and you start to hear like a click, 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 that means that the head in one of these hard drives is dying. And you have a very, very short window of opportunity to save your data onto some other device because physically there's something wrong with these cars. Same reason why maybe an electric car might last longer than a non-electric car, because a mechanical car would have moving parts, right? You have pistons that are going up and down, and they need oil and these kinds of things, right? Where an electric car, it's just a battery. There's fewer moving parts, so hopefully the maintenance of it would last longer with fewer moving parts. That's the downside of these, the moving parts. All right. Now, also in your laptop, you might have, instead of this kind of drive, which is mechanical, you might have this. This is a solid state hard drive. Okay, so it looks like this. There's different kinds. This is one kind. A different kind. Sorry, I don't have one to show you. It's inside of my computer, so can't do it. But you'll notice no motors, no disks. It's like a chip, right? And so this is a solid state drive. This one is 240 gigabyte. So it's more expensive. If you wanted this is a 1 terabyte. You can find a 1 terabyte here, but there's going to be a difference in price of about 5. So you might be able to get a 1 terabyte drive here for, I don't know, $50, $60, $70. A 1 terabyte drive here, maybe not 5 times as much. Maybe $200, $300, something like that, for like a 1 terabyte solid state drive. Now, although this is more expensive, it's much, 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 much faster. Because the mechanical ones, you have to spin up the disk. You might notice this either on your own computer or using other computers. If the computer is idle for a while, it's not doing anything, and then you start clicking around opening programs, and then you start hearing like a that kind of thing. That is the spinning up of the hard drive to access information. So these aren't spinning at the fastest speeds all the time, because that's going to wear down the motor. It's going to make the hard drive die sooner. So the hard drive is spinning at kind of a low rate until you're accessing it, and then it will spin up much, much faster and stuff like that. This, because there's no motor, it is much faster. You don't need to wait for anything to spin up. You don't need a head that moves back and forth reading different parts of a disk. It's just a chip. So this is much faster. And you might have these in your computers now. If you have a Mac or whatever, you could likely have a solid state drive in your computer. In your phone, solid state. It's part of the reason why if you're upgrading your phone and you want to double the storage, it gets more expensive by maybe $100, $200. It's because there's no spinning, moving parts in your phone, because that's a bad idea. It's too mobile, right? You drop your phone. Like if you drop one of these when it's spinning, you probably broke it. So they don't have that in phones. They use this type of storage, solid state storage. All right, so that's the next tier in hardware. Then you have this. That is a micro SD card. This one is 32 gigabytes. You can also find these in 128, 256, 512, 1 gigabyte now. And this is also a solid state. The main thing about this is that it is small. Okay, smaller than this. So this you might have built inside of your phone. And if you're lucky enough, your phone might offer some expandable storage, which would be something like this. So this is a micro SD card. Let me show you the other side. So there's a bunch of little pins here. And as you can see, it's about the size of your fingernail. I mean, it's very, 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 very small. In the advent of storage, storage has both become bigger. 10 years ago, you would not have an 8 terabyte drive. Okay, so it gets bigger, and it also gets smaller. 10 years ago, you had this kind of drive and this kind of drive. This little tiny thing, being able to pack that much storage, 32 gigabytes. I have a bigger one in my phone, 256 gigabytes. Inside of this little tiny thing. Like, incredible. You know, every year we progress technologically. It's really outstanding. But this is another type of storage device. Now, this is going to be cheaper, actually, than your solid state drive, which is kind of interesting because this is smaller. I mean, not a ton smaller, but it is definitely smaller. The reason why is because this is so much faster. So this is faster than your micro SD card. If you were running an operating system, or if you're trying to run like a PC game off of something like this, the read-write speeds are going to be a little slow. So a solid-state drive would work better. Okay, so we have a couple classes. Mechanical. Just drop the SD card. Solid state. Okay? No moving parts. Moving parts. Cheaper, higher storage, can fail easier because of the moving parts. More expensive, faster, probably longer lasting, but less storage for a solid state. The only other thing is this, RAM, memory. So when you're talking about how much memory something uses, you're actually talking about this. If you're talking about a 100 gigabyte game, that's storage space. That's hard drives. Okay, that's these things. The difference between all four of these and this is smaller. This is an 8 gigabyte thing. I think you can find them up to 32, maybe 64 gigabytes. But this is much, 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 much faster RAM, this thing. The RAM in your laptop will look smaller than this. I'm sorry I don't have a stick of laptop RAM to show you. This is PC desktop RAM. And this is just so much faster than even a solid state drive. The solid state drive, this thing, these are probably the closest to each other among any of the hard drives. But even then, RAM is much faster. Now, one gigantic difference is that RAM needs power. It needs a power source in order to hold anything. So, for example, you open up applications on your computer. You open up Microsoft Word. The application is going to be loaded into memory. Maybe Microsoft Word, it's stored somewhere on your disk. And that way, when you turn off your computer, the program, Microsoft Word, is still on the disk. And now you boot up your computer, Windows, Mac OS, whatever loads, and then you double-click Microsoft Word. It's going to load up an application and move it from the hard drive onto your memory. The reason why it moves it is because this is, no joke, about 1,000,000 times faster than the hard drive. So this is just so much faster than this type of hard drive. Now, while it's 1,000,000 times faster than that kind of hard drive, it's a few hundred times, maybe 1,000 times faster than this. So still faster, but this is faster than this. This is the fastest of everything that we're talking about. The disadvantage is that everything in here is temporary. As soon as you restart your computer, if you power off your computer, everything stored in here goes away. It's gone. So this is only good for temporary storage while you're using your computer right now. Things can be moved to RAM, to memory, and now everything is nice and fast and quick for as much memory as you have. There's a thing called virtual memory, which is when you run out of actual memory, it will take up some space on your disk as pretend memory. So you have pretend memory that can come from the disk. Obviously, this is much slower than real memory. Okay, so as far as how you can categorize these things, micro SD card, solid state hard drive, RAM, all of these are solid state, no moving parts. The RAM stands out on its own because everything is temporary storage. As soon as there's no power, everything in this is gone. If you've been typing something on your computer and then like there's a power surge and the computer powers off and then you reboot and all of your work is gone, that's because while you were working, things were in RAM. Like the application, everything you're writing, it's in RAM. It hasn't been saved to disk. And then you lose power, which means all of your work gone. No way to get it back. That's the differentiating factor about RAM. It's temporary storage, other than the fact that it's fast. RAM, RAM, stands for Random Access Memory. Let me type that out here. Let's see. Random Access Memory is RAM. Also a Daft Punk album. Oh, is it? Okay. Well, yeah. Okay. So that's it. That's it for sort of on the hardware end of things. So again, we'll come back especially to this type of hard drive, because when you're working with databases, again in this class, imagine unfortunately we don't have petabytes or hundreds of terabytes or hundreds of terabytes of data to work with. We'll be working with data in the megabyte, hopefully gigabyte territory. But everything that you learn should be able to scale. All right, so if it works on databases of size measured in gigabytes, it's the exact same thing if you're working with petabytes. So nothing changes, it's just the scale. But when you're thinking about databases, think about a big scale. Think about hundreds of terabytes. Even if we're not directly doing those things in this class, everything applies to that size. And that's the way that I'm teaching, is that everything is applicable to large amounts of storage. And so for large amounts of storage, you're going to be dealing with these types of drives, okay? Not the solid state drives, because these are too small. These are great for your laptop, for your computer. Hold your operating system, for your phone, things like that. It's fine, because you can have maybe 1-2 terabytes maybe of storage, and that's plenty for your operating system, for things that you use often. But when you're talking about storing terabytes or petabytes of information, there's no petabyte drive. Instead, you would just have many of these terabyte drives. So maybe sometime next week, I'll come back to this and I'll talk a little bit more about what it looks like on the inside and how that affects the data structures that we use in databases. Okay, databases use a data structure called a B tree, and the reason for it is because of the way that it works on a hard drive like this. Okay, so I think it's important to have some kind of concept for the hardware parts. All right, I think that's good for the hardware. Before I go on, I'm going to move on to another topic, more algorithmic, for the last 15 minutes of class. But before I do that, I want to give you an opportunity to ask any questions or points of clarification or anything like that about any of the hardware stuff or anything else that we've talked about today. Okay, so just out of curiosity, you can just type yes or no. Is there anybody who knows that what's the difference between read and write for hard drive and SSD? Yeah. So SSD, that's a solid state drive for everybody. HDD is hard drive. So you have the H and the D for hard, and then D for drive. Here, SSD, solid state drive. The read and write speeds on this are going to be much faster on an SSD than a hard drive. Now, it depends on what you're doing. For your operating system, for sure, should go on an SSD. Oftentimes, especially in a PC, you'd have both. You have a solid state drive for things that you want to go fast, and then you have a big drive like this that's cheaper to hold all of your big files. Your operating system you want on this because when you turn on your computer, you want to arrive at your operating system at your desktop as quickly as possible. So this will, if you have your operating system on this, you can be from power on to staring at your desktop in 10 seconds. If you use this, it might be something more like 30 seconds to a minute. And so that's important for your for your operating system. Not only when you're booting up, but when you're opening, closing windows, when you're dragging things around, when you're doing stuff on your computer. Mostly, you're interacting with your operating system. So having all of it on your SSD is a good option because it just makes everything snappier, faster, stuff like that. Now, if you have a hard drive like this, it's going to be slower read and slower write times. Part of it depends on some specifics here. There's a 5400 RPM, there's a 7200 RPM, that's rotations per minute. Obviously, a 5400 is slower than a 7200, but this is good for things like games, movies, things where it will take a while to load in the beginning, but after it's loaded, there's no difference. Like once everything's loaded up, there's no difference between these two. And because games and movies take up so much space, put them on a big hard drive that's slower. Great, when you open your game, it'll take 20 seconds to open instead of 5, but this is way cheaper. So as far as quantifying the speed differences more, I'd say that this is at least 100 times faster than this. Quantifying it more than that, it starts to depend. Is this a 5400? Is it a 7200 RPM? What kind of solid state drive are you using? This, I think, is called an M.2. No, I'm sorry, this is an M.2. There's different types of solid state drives, okay? Here's one. There's like 3 major ones. They each have different characteristics and stuff. But for this class, I don't want to go that deep. I think already this is pretty broad, a pretty good introduction to it. What's the hype about the new MacBook Silicon? They say it has an ARM architecture technology. What does that mean? Okay, so first of all, silicon is an element. It is very related to carbon. This isn't a chemistry class, but just to give a really quick hand-wavy explanation. Carbon is an atom. Most life on Earth is carbon. Like you yourself are mostly carbon. We are carbon-based organisms. That's why a tree burns, because you're taking carbon, and when you heat it up, there's oxygen in the air. That snaps together, creates heat. You have CO2. That's how you get things like global warming from burning fossil fuels, because they're very, very carbon dense. And carbon, the reason why we're carbon-based life forms, or the reason why that worked on Earth, is because carbon can attach to so many different things, to so many other different molecules. Carbon can attach with itself and make really complicated carbon structures, and carbon can match with oxygen, and carbon can match with lots of things. So it's a molecule that pairs together with other molecules really easily. Silicon is also like that, like carbon. You could also have silicon-based life, presumably. We've never found it, but presumably. And the thing about silicon is that it has some very good electrical properties. Way back in the 1930s, 1940s, 50s, pushing into the 60s, computers were just around, and they used something called a vacuum tube. A vacuum tube looks something like a light bulb. Okay, so that's why when you look at computers from like the 40s and stuff, like they took up entire rooms, because it was basically like light bulbs that you were plugging into them. They didn't give light, but these would be controlling the ones and the zeros. Now, after that came silicon, and realizing that instead of this gigantic vacuum tube where you have to, it's like a light bulb and you have to vacuum suck air out of it, because like a light bulb, if air gets inside, the filament is going to just burn immediately because things are made of carbon and oxygen, carbon dioxide, and that's how things heat up and burn. So you got to suck out the oxygen, and now it's under a vacuum, which means you can have the thing get really, really, really hot, and there's no oxygen inside there to bind, and you can run it hotter longer and stuff. Then came along IBM. They came up with a transistor. And a transistor is using silicon, where it turns out that if you apply a little bit of voltage inside of this silicon crystal, then it's just much, much more efficient for these on-off switches. And since then, everything has been silicon. CPUs, there's silicon in here, there's silicon in here. Yeah, CPUs, GPUs, they're using anything with transistors, things on-off switches. So especially in processing units, these are mainly storage. These actually don't use as much of silicon as things like CPUs. But a CPU is basically a bunch of on and off switches. Flip on, flip off, flip on, flip off. And you got to do it really fast. The faster you can do it, the better. And the more switches you can add, then the more switches you can flip. And so if you need to do some kind of computation and you need to flip some switches to kind of keep track of where you're at, the more switches, the better. The faster you can flip them on and off, the better. Okay, so that's generally about silicon. There's some more details, and again, I don't want to get too deep. I don't know about what's special with the new MacBook silicon. I would assume it's something, I don't know, some manufacturing, something that they did. Now, an ARM processor there's different types of processors, Intel, AMD, ARM processors. I thought that ARM processors were actually mobile, for mobile devices. So it surprised me that that'd be going into a MacBook. Let me double check this really quick. ARM processor. Specific type of computer processor designed according to a model developed by ARM. Processor design, reduced instruction set. Yep. Simplified, higher performance. Yeah. So, all right. So there's different types of CPUs. A CPU is called a central processing unit. Is the brain of the computer. Okay, it's the thing that does all of the processing. I'll also get a little bit into CPUs later in the course, but I guess I'll just eat up the rest of today talking about this. So, okay, so a CPU. I'm sorry I don't have one to show you, but they're chips about the size of this actually. A CPU would be a chip that's about that size. It's made of silicon. That has been there's some extra stuff that's been added to it actually. So they take the silicon and then they pollute it actually with some other chemicals depending on, I think boron is one that they might add, whatever. The important thing to know about CPUs is that they are on and off switches. These are called transistors. They're very small and they're very fast. Silicon is a material that can make a crystal. And this crystal happens to, especially when you dope it, it's called doping. When you mix pure silicon with some other elements, then you can get some really cool properties for a very fast, small switch. And so you have a bunch of those together, that's your CPU. In your laptop, in a PC, actually no, in a PC, that's going to be the fastest CPUs that you can get. And because things are small, they also get hot. So you need to worry a lot about cooling. So for a PC, that's why PCs are the best performance that you can get out of anything, because you have more room. You can put on a really big heat sink to pull heat away from the CPU that's generating a lot of heat. ARM CPUs are more power efficient. You might find them in some laptops. It depends on the laptop. If you have a gaming laptop, probably not an ARM, because you need something that's really fast. And for a gaming laptop, you'll have really loud fans and stuff to make it cool. But if you're talking about your phone, if you're talking about a tablet or a Chromebook, or these types of devices, you don't care as much about speed as you do about making them small, so you don't have a lot of room for cooling, and making them energy efficient, because most of these things are running off of a battery instead of directly to power, like a PC or even your laptop. You can power your laptop most of the time through proper power, especially if it's like a gaming laptop or something. Now, those are so there's some physical differences. ARM processors run at a lower power, they run a little bit slower, but they're more energy efficient, and you can have them in smaller devices. Other types of processors are faster, and also with these, the types of instructions that they handle. So a CPU, again, is the brain. The CPU can do things like add numbers together, subtract numbers, multiply numbers, divide numbers, these types of operations. And so there's a set of instructions that they support: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, moving, copying, different instruction sets that the CPUs support. ARM supports a certain set of instructions. Other CPU classes support a different set of instructions. That's more lower level kind of stuff. Okay, so guys, it's 1:20. I definitely don't want to keep you over again today. Thank you. I think that we're covered now for everything that we're going to be talking about today as far as hardware and files. Next class, we're just going to be focused on data structures, which is how do you take data and store it inside of a structure where you can get, for example, faster search. How can you have a structure for your data such that searching for something is super fast? And that's really important for databases because you're querying it a lot. So that's it. All right. Thank you, everybody. I will see you on Friday, and have a good couple of days.